Hi there, my friends. Good morning. Good that you tuned in again. God bless you. I hope you have a good day. Let's go to this Acts of the Apostles. And let me just tell you that I'm so excited about how God was dealing with these first Christians and what we can learn from them. Paul has now arrived in Jerusalem. We've been accompanying him for these last few days. We've seen how he's come from Europe, and he's been to Miletus. He called in Tyre. He was in Caesarea, and now he's in Jerusalem. And there he meets James, who he already knew, from long time ago. His relationship with James goes back quite a while. James didn't know he was coming. We know more than James did. James didn't know he was coming, but he met him, and Paul told them everything what had happened through his ministry with the people of the nations. He told them about how many people were finding Jesus, about the churches that were being planted, that these churches were planting other churches, that this gospel of the grace of God, this good news of Jesus, was spreading out, and more people were getting to know it, that miracles were happening, that God was touching people, that people were being healed. And they were very happy. They glorified God about this. And then when Paul had finished speaking, James started to speak, and he says, you know, brother, you know that there are now many 10,000s amongst the Jews who have believed, who are all very zealous for the law. And I have a little bit difficulty with this expression that James uses. They are all zealous for the law. Then he goes on in verse 21, he says, and they have been told about you that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or walk according to our customs. This isn't something that Paul did. I don't know what he did about circumcision, but this is not what he taught about. He didn't teach that they should leave their customs. He didn't try to take apart the synagogues. He was following the way. He was following Jesus, but he wasn't trying to destroy Judaism. But what they suggested, that he could prove that he was of good intentions, he would join 4 other men and pay for them, and join them who had taken a Jewish vow. They were purifying themselves, and it's a little bit difficult to explain, but Paul agreed to do it. I think what he was showing himself that even though he would purify himself, he would still not be acceptable to God, because you could only be acceptable to God through the grace of God. But he would show them that he was still Jewish. He never stopped being a Jew, and he wanted to be in the temple. He wanted to be there for the feast of Pentecost. And so, he said he would do that. So that's what he did, and it almost worked. We know into verse 27, and it says, when the 7 days of the purification, when the 7 days were almost completed, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, men of Israel, help this man who is teaching everyone everywhere against the people and against the law and against this place. And moreover, he has even brought Greeks into the temple. And they said that he brought Trophimus into the temple, which he hadn't done. He'd come alone. He'd not brought his Greek friends, his friends from the nations. He'd not brought them into the temple. He was there alone. But they got a hold of Paul. They seized him. They arrested him. And the Romans had to intervene. They wouldn't listen to Paul, and Paul tried to explain what his gospel was. He tried to explain what he had been doing, but they seized Paul and dragged him out of the temple, and at once the gates were shut. That's verse 30. And as they were seeking to kill him, word came to the tribune of the cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion, and the Romans came and they rescued him. And what Paul was doing, Paul's gospel was the gospel of inclusion, that everybody, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a barbarian, whether you are a Roman, whether you are a Greek, whether you are a German, whether you are a Syrian or an Englishman or an African or somebody from Asia or wherever you are, everybody can belong to this kingdom of God. Jesus died for everyone. He spilt his blood for everyone. He died for everyone on the cross. He was trying to show them that he is so inclusive. And they felt that was so terrible. People with strange cultures couldn't belong to the kingdom of God. They couldn't become this new man in Jesus Christ. That was impossible. That wasn't right. They closed the gates. And they were closing the gates on the nations, but they were actually closing the gates on God. And they didn't realize this. They were so exclusive. It's only about us. Later, Paul would get another chance to speak in Acts chapter 22, and they listened to him. But as he's finishing his message, he's telling them about how who he was, how he was brought up, what God had told to him. And when he came to verse 21 of chapter 22, and he said, "And God said to me, go, for I will send you far away to the nations." Verse 22, it says, up to this word they listened to him, but then they raised their voices and said, "Away with such a fellow from the earth, for he should not be allowed to live." Why should he die? Why should he be killed? Why should he be put to death? Because he was preaching against racism. He was preaching against the thing that people are excluded from the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is inclusive for all people, and for all people in the cities where we live. And nowadays there are people from many nations have come into our cities. God has sent them. They belong to they should belong to the kingdom of God. Let's reach out to them and open our doors that they can become part of this kingdom of many nations. God bless you. Have a good day. You're Bob Hatton.